Hey guys, it's Courtney Carson from Cosmic Clarity Astrology, and today we're going to be talking about the astrology of 2026. I did a really big deep dive last night doing research, pulling up charts, and I have to say this looks like a slightly tumultuous year ahead, and I'm going to kind of focus it on the most important things. Most astrologers like to talk about everything, like every retrograde, every Mercury retrograde, and this and that. In my opinion, I think that, those things matter maybe on a day to day basis. But when it comes to a collective year long reading and really looking at the turning points that we're going to be going through, I'm going to be discussing things that hit harder, that are going to make a major difference in our personal and collective lives. I will be kind of listing out things like retrogrades so that you have them. But again, I'm not really going to be focusing on the things that are not, to me, really going to make a huge difference. I'm not going to be diving into very deeply Saturn in Aries, Neptune in Aries, or Uranus in Gemini, because those planets, I've already done a deep dive into them, and I'm going to link down below the videos that I did for that. So if you're curious what those planets ingressing into those signs mean for your rising sign or your sun sign, then you can go ahead and check those out down below. Okay, so I'm going to pop up on the screen here a list of the key moments and times when we have major transits, eclipses, ingresses, which is basically when a planet moves into a sign, and retrogrades. And I'm going to, again, be focusing on the most important ones. But if you want like a large, number of them and you want to look at everything, that's what you can have a look at in your own research. Okay, so let's start off with these kind of major moments. So I broke the year up into segments when there was a large amount of activity going on. The first major segment is happening throughout February and March. And this is when we're going to be having the Saturn and Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries. I do think I'll do a separate video on that because it's such a big deal. But this has a similar theme to it, as did Saturn and Pluto coming together, which actually started off COVID. So, these outer planets, they move very slowly. And so it's somewhat rare for them to align in the sky like this. And so when they do, or when they make aspects to each other, those aspects kind of linger for a while, and they create themes that affect us on a larger societal level for a period of time, and they kind of envelop these certain chapters in our lives. So we had obviously the COVID period, which was its own chapter that extended many years. And so now we're going to kick off a new period of time with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Again, I don't know if I want to get like super into the nitty-gritty of this, because I think I want to do a whole separate video that does that. But essentially at this period of time, I do think it's going to ignite a spark where there is the potential for some major shifts in our lives. And Saturn and Neptune can both be related to things dissolving in certain ways. So the structures of our life, of our society, or ways that we have believed something, or things that we have hung our hat on, could start to dissolve or change shape. We could become disillusioned. We could see that there is an old path of our lives that is running its course, and a new path emerging, especially because these planets are coming together at the very first degree of the very first sign of the zodiac, 0 degrees Aries. So there is something quite fresh and new about the quality of these planets coming together here, which indicates the potential for, again, something that we really haven't seen or done before in our personal lives and on a collective scale. This major conjunction is also taking place wedged between two eclipses. So it's going to be preceded just 3 days before by a solar eclipse in Aquarius, and then it's going to be followed on March 3rd by a lunar eclipse in Virgo. So eclipses occur in two seasons, basically. We have two sets of eclipses, and this is the first season of the year. And eclipses are always what generate some of the most kind of volatility. It's usually when we're seeing, political figures die or wars start or, laws go into action or some kind of chaos. That's usually happening around eclipses. And on a personal scale, a lot of people also will have things like that really shake up their lives, like losing their job or losing a loved one or moving. Again, those typically happen around eclipses. So to have those eclipses already occurring, and then this major conjunction of Saturn and Neptune right in the middle of it, again, is kind of this hot spot of energy towards that kind of middle end of February and beginning of March. And so I think that there is going to be the potential for, again, quite a lot of change in our personal lives. There could be some things going on that potentially disrupt travel or foreign relations or movement, progress. This is also because Mercury will also be retrograding during this time from late February to kind of mid to late March. So, having all of this chaos happen and then Mercury retrograde at the same time is kind of adding fuel to the fire for things to be misconstrued or communications to fail or issues with travel or transportation to occur in an already, again, kind of weakened time or chaotic time. So not helpful, but it is helpful in the sense that we are kind of going back to the drawing board as a community and as individuals in our lives and reflecting on, again, what really isn't working. And I think a lot of it can, again, come from a feeling of maybe disillusionment, that I thought something was going to go one way, or I thought my life was going to be in a different place, or, I really idealized something and then I got there and the reality of it wasn't quite what it was supposed to be. There can also be sometimes revelations around things where, maybe people made us promises, like our government made us promises, or, we thought, again, that something was leading into a certain direction, and then it turns out that it was a lie or it wasn't true, in some facet. So there can be that level of discontent and maybe even just discontent, disillusionment, apathy that leads us to want to reflect during Mercury retrograde on our lives and what is working for us and what isn't working for us. And again, it's really about a time of reinvention, but this is a larger chapter. So just like COVID, this is initiating or kicking off a new cycle rather than being its own bubble of time. It is going to be reverberating out, especially into the summer months, which we'll talk about in a second. So I think many of us will be going through, again, some chaos in our lives where we're going to be balancing the things that we can't see or understand about our lives, which comes from Neptune, which is a planet of confusion. There's always going to be some element of unknown or things that are misunderstood or things that we, again, just can't see. And then the element of Saturn, which can bring up fear. It can bring up kind of realism, facing the truth of something, rationality, logic, and the need to make important decisions. So we might be kind of straddling those two concepts. So almost that, we see that our current predicament isn't really, living up to the hype in our own mind. And so we know that we want to make a change, but we can't see where that change is going to lead us. We don't actually know if what around the corner is better. And so we're having to kind of face the reality of what's going on now and make decisions about the future from an unclear place. That could be the case for a lot of us. It's potential to be an exciting time, but it can also feel, again, like it might stir a lot more just kind of fear or depression in people. So if you're also experiencing that, that's also really normal. In general, it's a time of soul searching, and you're not soul searching typically from a really ecstatic place in life. I mean, you definitely can be if you're just inspired about what's new, but usually soul searching comes from the upheaval of certain structures of your life, certain things that you've depended on, and things that you had planned. And so it's time to realize new ambitions as a result of those things falling away. Again, I think we could potentially have issues with travel, and particularly with like elements of things that involve the sea, because Neptune rules the ocean. So if there are things with like ships or cruises that go wrong, that could potentially happen during this time, or even planes or trades, like things that kind of involve this circulation of information or of goods. I think many of us could be going through periods of self-doubt, of wondering if we're on track, if we have what it takes for something new in our lives. So even if we can imagine something new, it might be hard to really feel confident about that thing. Some of us might feel excited about it, but again, a lot of us might feel this kind of trepidation or uncertainty around if this is going to work for us. And so we might be really questioning, I see this ideal, I see this dream, but is that possible? And people could also be going through that on a collective scale. If we're trying to fix something within the government or within our lives, what are we, like, we might have a vision, but are we able to attain that? That's a whole other question. And so I think a lot of this is going to be around having patience, because, I asked Spirit for 3 cards around what are the key words. And one of the cards was She Who Waits, which is a card of patience, waiting, and determination. So I think we're going to have to be in this for the long haul, and the changes that we start in February, or that we think about starting in February, are going to take many years to unfold, and we need to have patience to realize these dreams, and also be able to kind of sit with, maybe they're not going to look exactly like they are in our head, and that's okay too. I think it's important right now to not be overly dogmatic or really focus on one way things can manifest, because again, the way that we see things in our head is unlikely to be how they physically come to being. That doesn't mean that it won't embody the same essence. I think that it will, but this placement does kind of point towards reality and fantasy commingling in a way that doesn't allow for pure fantasy and idealism to reign, because there is the constraints of reality. We have to there is a world that we're having to contend with, and taking something from the idea or the dream phase and putting it to the material world is always going to reshape it in some form or another to fit into the dense material world. So that is what we're going to have to be willing to adjust to and adapt to, is moving towards the ideal and adjusting to the reality as we go along. Okay, so I put up, I'll put up a chart here so that you can kind of see a period of time in February that is particularly interesting to me, which is the Aquarius solar eclipse. And you can see Saturn and Neptune are conjunct at 0 Aries during this time, and Mercury is in Pisces, but it will be turning retrograde. So Mercury is really going to be struggling, because Mercury doesn't like to be in Pisces, and then also retrograding through Pisces is kind of like a really deficient Mercury. So that's why I think travel, communication, those things can really take a hit during this time. So the second period of time that's really interesting to me is around July and August. This is where I think things are going to grow in intensity quite a bit. And I'm frankly not really looking forward to this time. So I do think that one of the reasons why July is such a big month is because there are a number of outer planet transits all happening at once. So we're going to be having Uranus sextiling Neptune. We're going to be having, first of all, right before July, on June 30th, Jupiter moves into Leo. So that's already going to shift. And I'll talk about what that means in a second. And then right after that, we're going to have Uranus sextile Neptune. We're going to have Uranus trine Pluto, Jupiter trine Neptune, Jupiter opposite Pluto, Jupiter sextile Uranus, Neptune sextile Pluto. We're going to have a nodal shift, which is also really, really major, on July 27th. And I'll get more into detail about that. And then shortly after that in August, we're going to have eclipses. So just so you know, as an astrologer, it's not typical to see so many, slower planets making aspects to one another. And so this is a very, very busy month in the stars. And whenever we have a very busy month in the stars, there's usually some chaotic BS going down in society and in the world. And I'm particularly concerned with this period of time. And also Mercury will be retrograding for part of this time as well, which is there's just always something, right? And it will finally be moving direct in July, so it will retrograde for part of it. And Neptune and Saturn will also be turning retrograde, and again, we'll have that nodal shift. So followed by the eclipses in August. So a lot is going on. So let's talk about what I see overall for this month. I definitely think that there is going to be some kind of protest going on, some kind of rising up, fighting back. One of the concerns is Jupiter moving into Leo on the last day of June. So Jupiter is already the planet associated with kings, and then Leo is like the sign of kings. And when we have a placement like this, which I'll show you on the screen so you can see, when we have a placement like this, we have this kind of endorsement of and focus on elitism, hubris, again, kings and queens, overconfidence, a really big push towards like people who have a lot of power can really want more, or there can be a sense of greed. And again, it's going to really make a clear distinction between the haves and have-nots. Jupiter and Leo just sort of backs people in power who, again, are elitist or have a lot more. So when we have Jupiter come into an opposition with Pluto in Aquarius, Aquarius is about the people. So we're going to have kind of the kings or the elites versus the everyday people and the proletariats, if you will. And so we're going to see some clashing here around the interest of the few versus the interest of the many. And I definitely think we're going to see some volatility occur as a result of this movement from Jupiter into Leo, and even more so when the nodes shift signs, which the North Node will shift into Aquarius and South Node into Leo on July 27th. And that's when I think this is going to up the ante around this antagonism between these two polarities. When we have a nodal shift, we have a brand new chapter emerge where we have a focus on particular topics associated with these two polarities kind of fighting each other. So for example, when we had the nodal shift in, when we had the South Node in Gemini and North Node in Sag, or was it the North Node in Gemini? So it was North Node moving to Aquarius. So yeah, it was North Node and Sag. So when we had, I'm very tired today. But yeah, when we had that, when we had the South Node, Gemini, North Node, and Sag, we had like a huge blow up of, I feel like, misinformation online, and a lot of people came online. This was kind of during COVID time, and everyone was like forced onto the internet. Not forced, but everyone started a podcast, everyone and their mother, and then travel kind of stopped, which is Sagittarius. We weren't able to go out into the world and travel the world anymore. And I just found that really interesting. And then we had the Aries North Node and Libra South Node. And during that period of time, we were having a lot of like men versus women and a huge rise of celebrity beauty brands. But we were also having like a war on women's rights. So anyway, with what I'm trying to say here is that there will be this polarity between the people and then the everyday people, and then the people in power, the people who have and people who have not. And it's going to potentially give initially, I feel like the South Node tends to generate quite a lot of energy, but a lot of toxicity as well. So I think that we'll definitely see some people try who already have power, who already have a lot, to grasp for more and try to control more, which is concerning. And so I think that people are going to start to see this in July and rise up in some kind of defiant way to fight back and to grow in terms of resistance, especially when we see that North Node shift into Aquarius at the end of the month. And when we have that Jupiter-Pluto opposition on the 20th, so 20th and 27th, I feel like those are going to be some kind of peak moments. I think that this month is going to require a lot of adaptability in order to survive. We're going to be stepping, especially again with that North Node in Aquarius, we're going to be stepping into some uncharted territory. And as a result, we're going to have to ask ourselves, who do I need to become to, adapt, to live the life that I desire, or at the very least to survive in this new environment? It'll kind of depend on who we are and what our circumstances are. I do think that this is going to be a time of some type of painful transition that is going to require a lot of strength and, again, adaptability, like I mentioned. So we might have some kind of karmic obstacle that we're facing as a society. We might have some type of trial or like some type of suffering in some kind of way, something getting in our way of advancing. And again, I think it involves some type of painful transition, in particular coming from the government. So I think that we're going to have powers that be, hierarchies, institutions, or again, our government or prisons. I think it's going to show that there is an exploitation of the people. I think that we are going to be potentially alienated from one another in some way, or from resources that we need. And I think that we're going to, again, have to push or fight back in some capacity. I think that there's going to be issues with really basic things like our food, our money, our work, our transportation, our communication, kind of like how people just move about their daily life and interact with one another. I think it's going to somehow be disrupted, or there's going to be tension put on it and nervousness about it. So maybe there will be scarcity, maybe there'll be a recession, which we're already kind of in anyway. But I could see that reaching some kind of peak period or some type of announcement in regards to that. I think that there could be online frenzy, people arguing with each other, again, nervousness. And so I think it might be difficult, again, to kind of just survive around that time. I think there's going to be quite a bit of tension. I think also people are going to be looking back onto the past and with nostalgia, like, remember when things used to be stable? Remember when we used to have money? And it's potential that could be detrimental if, the powers that be try to take us back to a previous time, because that can happen with Saturn-Neptune conjunctions where there can be almost like an idealization of times past. And we've already kind of seen that because Saturn and Neptune have been dancing around each other really over the summer, but they haven't come exact yet until February. And then, when they come together, it represents sometimes the desire to return to a more conservative, traditional, and, time and laws based in antiquity. So I'm concerned about losing progress. And as we have the North Node move into Aquarius, I think that the people are going to find that especially problematic. I mean, it's already problematic, but again, I think when that North Node moves into Aquarius, people are going to start to generate more resistance to it and actually act in different ways. So I think that fondness of looking back into the past, on a societal level, like on a individual level makes sense, but on a societal level, like pushing towards tradition, I do worry about that. So, and when I say it makes sense on an individual level, I mean it makes sense for people who do miss times that were simpler, or times where, we weren't struggling so much as a nation. And I'm speaking primarily as an American. So if you're not an American and this doesn't really align with your experiences, that's not I'm not looking at a world focus necessarily, though I do think that obviously astrology is going to affect the globe, and one country will affect other countries, and we're all kind of tied together. So I'm sure this will be relevant for you anyway, but obviously I'm looking at it from my own country's perspective. So I think that there's going to be quite a lot of fighting amongst people, or if, at least people versus government. There's going to be some kind of fighting going on here. I do wonder if there's a potential for, war in 2026, especially with that Saturn Neptune coming into zero Aries. I think it could kick off a series of events that lead to discord and to some type of fighting. It doesn't have to be war per se. And if it does look like war, that war could look totally different now in, 2025, or I guess 2026, than it would in the previous years. So that's also something to consider, is that I think technology will play a really big part in adversarial relationships and conflict, that it might not look like traditional war anymore. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So for me, I think it's going to be really distinguishing the people who are going to be supporting the elites and kind of hoarding everything for themselves, and the people who do have resources, do have money, because there's always like spectrums of this, but they decide to help out other people who don't have anything. They decide to give back. They decide to donate to the poor, to volunteer, to give their resources, whatever. And so I think that there is going to be a clear divide of people who are ignoring the suffering of the everyday people, and the elites who are in their own world, who don't recognize that people don't have things that they need to survive. And then there are going to be people and who are maybe stuck in materialism and superficiality, and it's going to really, really exaggerate that level of being out of touch with the everyday world and the everyday suffering of people with that Jupiter and Leo. And then we're going to have the people who do have resources, but they are recognizing, and they're very much in reality, and they're doing what they can to help those that are struggling. So again, I'm seeing some tension here occur. Quite a bit of divide in July. And I have, one of the other cards that I have is She Who Regrets, Battle, Victory, and Bitterness. So yeah, I think one of the other major themes for 2026 is battle. And I do think that is going to lead to some losses, or lead to some hardships of some sort amongst our people. The other card that I have is She Who Emerges, Enlightenment, Mindfulness, and Rise Up. So I do think that we're going to be becoming enlightened to certain things that have been going on within our government. And I think that we're going to rise up to make the necessary changes to our structures of society, which is a very Saturn-Neptune conjunction, type of trope, which is, again, kicking off in February. So as a result of the messiness going on in July, I think that August will be a time of, potential cracking down, I should say. And I do worry, because we're going to have eclipses at this time, and I'll put up another chart on the screen here. We're going to have a Leo solar eclipse, which is happening really close to the ascendant and Mars of Donald Trump, which is obviously a U.S. president. And during that time, he also has Jupiter and Leo passing over his Pluto in Leo. This is concerning to me. I do think a number of things could happen. So, yeah. I don't want to really narrow it down to one thing, but I'm going to kind of give a list of ideas of what could result of this. So I do think that there could be some reactionary response to what happened in July. So if people are protesting, or if there's discord, I could see there being some kind of government surveillance going on, media censorship, some kind of way to hunt or attack people who are protesting, new laws being passed that tried to suppress people. And one of the reasons is because Jupiter passing over Pluto is like ruthless in pursuit of power and more. It's quite greedy placement. It's quite greedy transit and power hungry transit. And so with someone's chart like Trump's, it does concern me that there could be an overstepping of power to suppress people, and the people who are trying to fight. It could also indicate that some grievances, like some issues and grievances around the recession, could try to be squashed at this time. People who are pushing for their freedoms and fighting back over things that have caused us great pain and as a nation, I do think that people are going to, again, kind of divide, like be put into two divisions. People who are fighting for something, who are seeing the injustice and who are saying something, doing something about it. And then there are going to be people who become disengaged and apathetic and depressed and feel kind of helpless. And I think, again, it's going to kind of go both ways. It is also possible that us as a nation goes through that. So like if there's some kind of war or natural disaster or something that happens, something that's really common with Saturn-Neptune conjunctions is that the government does not step up to help the people, and that it's the everyday people that have to coalesce and come together and help one another, which I think that's already, yeah, anyway. But yeah, you can see that is very possible to happen, that the government, the structures that be, the powers that be, that are there to support in cases of disaster or war or some type of, negative thing happening, that they really disengage, and that the people and the individual has to step up to replace that lack of presence. I think that there could be something going on with news. So I pulled cards about this specific eclipse because I was curious if I could get more details. And I was getting something around like news, communication, writings, policy, signed documents, social media, correspondence, receiving of information or divulging of secrets or secretive information, or like surveillance, negative judgment calls. So I feel like there's going to be something going on at this point in time when it comes to the distribution or receiving of information. And again, it could be through any of those channels, but I think something is going to potentially either come to light or something negative is going to happen that's going to be announced, or again, there's going to be some type of censorship or surveillance going on, something like that. I do think we're going to have some, again, chaos, fighting, ego clashing continuing on from July. I think that many people are going to feel quite overwhelmed and very anxious and maybe in a negative kind of mindset, almost like this. I think some of us will be reaching a place where we feel unable to cope or unable to continue on with how things are. And I definitely think that we're going to be entering into a period of a deepening of the recession, of unemployment and financial ruin to some degree that is going to put people in a very stressed place. So I really hate to give this like analysis of 2026, but I want you guys to be aware of what's coming so that you can kind of wrap your head around the potential of some of these things to happen. I did also want to look at like a historical analysis of some of the things going on in 2020 or in July 2026. So like I mentioned, we're going to be having on July 20th, Jupiter opposite Pluto, which I've been talking is a lot around the people fighting back against the haves and have-nots. This particular placement happens, or this transit happens every like 12 and a half years, more or less. And it's typically associated with things like radicalism in religion, beliefs, or speculation, blowing things up, so things becoming over idealized, or like a literal bubble, like the .com bubble, which we'll talk about in a second. Massive growth, but it could have a temporary nature or a malignant nature. So it's something that's growing and growing, but it doesn't have the potential to last or to be healthy long term. Hidden information becoming exposed, especially what is false or corrupt, or developments regarding privacy, intelligence information, and spying. I also think that there can be quite a bit developing in terms of technology dealing with nuclear radiation or other technological advances, potentially involving AI, especially with Pluto and Aquarius. We're going to have a lot going on with technology that's at its play here, which could, again, really change the way that war looks or battles look. We could have a clash of powers, restructuring of society, examining laws, the question of who judges society for what is good or what is evil. And then we could have issues regarding travel or foreign relations and mistrust of others. So those are kind of like larger concepts of Jupiter opposite Pluto. The last time this happened was 2013, 2014 time when Jupiter was in Cancer, Pluto was in Capricorn. This is when the US issued a global travel warning. And there was a lot of instability going on in Syria, which led to ISIS taking over. And of course, we know ISIS as an extremist party. So they are going to have these kind of radical beliefs, which again is a very Jupiter opposite Pluto experience. The last time we had Jupiter opposite Pluto before that was in 2000 and 2001. And during this time, we had the dot-com bubble, we had a financial crash. And so there was a lot of kind of speculation and misinformation and whatnot around, the internet, and a lot of money thrown at it. And then it ended up being something that blew up in our faces. So that's one of the placements. On June 30th, like I mentioned, we're going to have Jupiter move into Leo, and Jupiter in Leo can bring up themes around spectacle, kings, prominence of power, building up leadership and nations, creative advancements, law, rule, and religion, influenced by greater hubris, confidence, and over self-importance. Like charming or dominating leaders can come into greater power. And again, Trump has his ascendant in Leo. So this Jupiter in Leo, I think, is going to potentially, aggrandize his sense of self. And I do worry about what that's going to do for us, especially on that eclipse on August 13th, with that eclipse where Jupiter is over his Pluto. I think that there could be some missteps that he makes, especially during this time when transiting Mars is transiting Neptune. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about historically before I get on to the next phase of the year is the last time that the North Node was in Aquarius and South Node was in Leo. This repeats roughly every 18 years. This brings up themes around the collapse of institutions, people, or reputations that have held too much power so that they can be redistributed amongst the people. And that is Aquarius. Aquarius rules like the stratification. So not the hierarchy, but more of like a level playing field and things being spread wide. But this is often on the back of great loss or change that creates that disruption. Seeking support, global or humanitarian efforts for larger groups of people. Again, this is Aquarius. And inventions and growth of new technologies that will hold precedent for a long time and pave the way for future advancements in technology. So the last time this happened was in December 2011 to August 2009. The last time we had North Node Aquarius, South Node Leo. There was a global financial crisis during this time, the Great Recession. We received a stimulus package from China, as the U.S. We had to completely restructure our banks and bailout systems and had to redefine our financial policies because the way that everything was set up was doomed to fail. We had the continued rise of social media. In particular, Facebook really took hold at this time, and that completely changed the name of the game for us. We had growing awareness of climate change, and Obama was elected president, which definitely shifted. If we moving from Bush to Obama, we had a major shift from kind of traditional sense of power to more progressive sense of power. So that is the North Node in Aquarius for you, which is exciting to see how things can develop. But obviously there's a lot of tension and kind of chaos that often goes along with that. The previous time before that we had North Node in Aquarius, South Node in Leo was May 1989 and November 1990. This was marking the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. Again, very Aquarius. The end of the Cold War and a shift to, again, more collective power. Nelson Mandela was finally released from jail after 27 years in prison. And we were pushing the Students in China were pushing more towards democracy and having protests. And then we also launched the Hubble Space Telescope. And even more importantly, the prototype for the World Wide Web was being constructed at this time. So major technological developments and themes of kind of freedom and the people and progress and movement. And so that is going to start initiating on July 27th. And we're going to see again, some people really push back on the powers that be as a result of this movement. So the last phase of time that is particularly important to me that I'm noticing is going to be around February. October. So this is occurring October and November. And I'm a little concerned with this time period when it comes to relationships. I was also pulling cards around this, and I was just getting so much around isolation, time alone, separation, resting. Again, just like this sense of, isolation and just people doing their own thing. That makes a lot of sense to me because we are having Venus going retrograde from October 3rd to November 13th. And it's retrograding starting off in Scorpio. So Venus is already in detriment in Scorpio, and then it's going to retrograde through this sign. So that is concerning to me in the sense that I think relationships can become especially strange. So on a personal level, I do think that people are going to be pulling back from their connection with others. I think they're going to be reflecting a lot on their lives. Some people might go through potential breakups or divorces as a result of this, especially people who have quite a lot of Scorpio energy or Venus in Scorpio natally. They might notice, or Venus in Libra natally as well, because it will also retrograde through Libra. So you might notice that there's some tension in relationships and breakdown and reevaluation of the things that you previously valued in your connections with others. On top of that, we're also going to have Jupiter and the South Node in Mars all conjunct together on November 12th. And this is going to be when Venus is moving really slowly in the sky. And I think that can indicate that there is some potential to have a clash of ego, a clash of pride, overconfidence, greed that influences relationships in a way that makes people choose themselves. And at the end of November, Uranus will trine Pluto, which I think can, again, lose tolerance for oppression or for the BS and people being willing to make changes that they need to make. So the overall, period of October, November, I'm seeing this as a time when people are going to, again, be isolated, reclusive, staying home, keeping energy to themselves and reflecting. I think that this is an overall period of inaction. So we had a lot of busyness over July and August, and I think that November and October is going to be a period of antisocial slowing down and a time of observation, soul searching and contemplation, again with that Venus retrograde, to kind of process what's been going on for this really chaotic first half of the year. I think it's possible that some people could potentially try to seek revenge during this time, and that could be any country against the US or people against the government. I think that could also be going on. But again, I'm seeing more of a kind of timidness or like inaction from the people during this time. Or maybe people are focusing more on their personal lives and their relationships and their finances. I think that this is also a time where we're going through a rebirth. So part of the pulling back comes from needing to reevaluate what things are going to look like. Because if we are fighting for something better, if we're trying to create justice where there was injustice or hope where there was a lack of hope, then we need to understand what exactly we're trying to create. What does justice and hope look like? Like, what does that structurally look like in our lives or in our society? I think also this time is a lot of reflection where we're meant to be not blaming one another, which is, again, a huge issue during all of this, is the potential for people to kind of turn on one another. So instead, this time is meant to be us taking accountability where we can so that we can focus on building something together rather than tearing each other down. And Uranus trining Pluto can help us with this process of restructuring. I do think that relationships and money, though, are going to get worse before they get better. So while that is going on, and while it's a general impetus as a collective for us, I do think that relationships and money, again, during this period are going through a period of degradation and breakdown because of that Venus retrograde. And so I think that we're in a period of regrouping, reflecting. So if there is a sense of like, oh, we're protesting against something, I think that there might be, again, a pull back to regroup and define more of the mission. I think that also as an individual, we're going to be focusing a lot on building up our sense of security right now. So this could look like I'm staying home, I'm saving money, I'm doing what I can for self-preservation and preparing for the future to protect myself, to try to focus on stabilizing the things that have once been really chaotic. Maybe there's a focus on family or focus on money, and again, security in some type of way that is going to be driving everybody at this time. So we're going to be kind of entering into, like almost a kind of like a hibernation, like bears go into hibernation to preserve their calories and to stay safe during the winter. So that's kind of how I see this period of time for us. I think that people are going to be waking up a lot right now. People are going to be doing more research, and that I think is also pertaining to Venus retrograde through Scorpio. Secrets can come to light in our personal relationships, but also about ourselves and about our, society. I think we could be seeing some more information or looking at things through new eyes in a way that is going to help us see the truth or the fuller picture in which maybe some of that has not been disclosed previously. I think that people are going to be a lot more objective and discerning and logical, and again, trying to solve problems or look at things through honest eyes. I think, of course, there could be some blow up of this energy at first where people are maybe not as logical, maybe they're more emotional, but I think we will end up at a logical place. So even if there's some initial inflammation, I think it will come to a place of discernment at the finality of this, especially like in November, towards the end of November. And again, I think we're going to be soul searching and focusing on personal and societal patterns that we keep getting stuck in, things that we are in cycles in or ruts that we are in. I think we're going to be questioning the things that we're motivated by and asking if that's the thing that still motivates us today, or if there is a different way that we can pursue the path that we're on. So that's what I'm seeing for us for 2026. It looks like a really big year, quite a bit of chaos. If you are interested in Saturn and Aries, Neptune and Aries, or Uranus and Gemini, make sure you check out those videos, which I will link down below. If you are, wanting to add any of your own ideas about what's coming up this year, things that have come to you intuitively, or if you have questions or concerns or things that, are going to affect you personally, then let me know in the comments down below. I do love to hear everybody's speculations, and, I think that a convergence of all of our minds is going to be much stronger than obviously just mine. So I'm excited to see what this year has to bring. Hopefully it's not that bad, but we'll see. And I appreciate you guys staying tuned all the way to the end. If you did, don't forget to leave a comment, maybe leave some kind of smiley emoji down below so I know that you did watch this all the way through, since that's a rarity. And I hope that you guys have a beautiful day. Bye.